Imagine waking up to the sound of sirens blaring. The sky is empty, but the fear is palpable. You reach for your phone, and there it is. The headline: Nuclear threat looms over Europe. You've heard the warnings before, but this time it feels different. Could this be the beginning of the end? Russia's nuclear rhetoric is back in full swing, and the world is watching. But are we really on the brink of nuclear war? Or is this just another calculated move by Putin to shake the West's resolve? Today we're going to dissect the reality behind these threats, peel back the layers of geopolitical maneuvering, and explore why nuclear war may not be as imminent as some fear, but also why it's not off the table. Let's dive in. Just when we thought the world had moved past the specter of a nuclear standoff, the Russians have brought it back into the limelight. Over the last few months, Putin and his propagandists have started talking about nuclear strikes again. Belarusian forces are conducting joint exercises with Russia, and tactical nukes are being showcased like chess pieces on a board. But why now? Why, after a relatively quiet period, are we seeing this nuclear saber rattling? Is this just another phase of psychological warfare, or is something more sinister at play? Here's the reality. When Russia talks nuclear, it's not just about flexing military might. It's about sending a message to the West: back off. And the timing couldn't be more telling. The recent increase in Western support for Ukraine, particularly in the form of US and European military aid, has made Moscow nervous. When Macron hinted at French troops possibly setting foot in Ukraine, and Britain greenlit the use of their weapons inside Russian borders, the Kremlin's nuclear rhetoric spiked. So is this nuclear talk a sign of strength or weakness? To answer that, let's examine the fundamental role of nuclear weapons in Russia's military strategy. Nuclear arms aren't the go-to weapons of conquest. They're tools of desperation, used when all other avenues have failed. If your conventional forces can win, you don't reach for the nuclear option. But if those forces falter, the temptation grows stronger. So let's be real. Russia's ongoing war in Ukraine has not gone as planned. What was supposed to be a quick and decisive special military operation has turned into a prolonged and bloody quagmire. Their conventional forces, once thought to be unstoppable, are facing significant setbacks. Every time the West sends another shipment of weapons or financial aid, Moscow's grip on Ukraine loosens just a little more. And every time that grip loosens, the talk of nukes gets louder. But, and here's the critical point, Russia's use of nuclear weapons is still incredibly unlikely. Why? Because nukes don't win wars. They create chaos. They invite retaliation. They provoke global condemnation. And for Russia, that would mean losing the little political and military leverage it still holds. So let's play out the scenario. Let's imagine for a moment that Russia does deploy a tactical nuclear weapon in Ukraine. What happens next? First, it's important to note the distinction between tactical and strategic nuclear weapons. Tactical nukes are designed for use on the battlefield. Essentially, they're just massive bombs targeting military assets. They're not meant to wipe out cities, but they still carry devastating consequences. Strategic nukes, on the other hand, are meant for terror, obliterating civilian populations to force submission. But here's the catch. Whether it's tactical or strategic, one thing is certain: the world's nuclear powers will not stand idly by. The United States, France, the UK, nuclear-armed nations will be forced to respond. And that response could range from economic isolation to direct military intervention. There's even the risk of triggering NATO's collective defense mechanism, Article 5, if any NATO territory is affected. Do you really think Russia is ready for that kind of global backlash? Now let's talk about the other side of the equation, Putin himself. If he were to authorize a nuclear strike, he would have to go on national television and explain to the Russian people why their country is now in a nuclear war. He would have to justify why, after months of claiming the special military operation was going well, it was suddenly necessary to take the most extreme step imaginable. This would be political suicide. The Russian government has been very careful to maintain the narrative that they're winning, that the war is under control. A nuclear strike would shatter that illusion. It would be an admission that things are not going well, that the Russian military is failing. And Putin, who has tied his political fate to the success of this war, would face unprecedented opposition, both from within his own ranks and from the Russian public. But the consequences of using a nuclear weapon go beyond Russia and Ukraine. One of the most dangerous outcomes would be the collapse of the global nuclear non-proliferation regime. Right now, only 9 countries possess nuclear weapons, and all of them have a vested interest in keeping it that way. If Russia uses a nuclear bomb in Ukraine and emerges victorious, or even if they avoid defeat, then the message to the rest of the world is clear: nuclear weapons work. And countries like Japan, South Korea, Saudi Arabia, and even Germany might feel compelled to start their own nuclear programs. The domino effect could lead to a new nuclear arms race, with potentially catastrophic consequences. Can you imagine a world where dozens of nations have access to nuclear weapons? Where every regional conflict carries the risk of global annihilation? That's the world we would be facing if Russia were allowed to use nuclear weapons without facing severe consequences. There's one more factor to consider. Russia's nuclear doctrine states that the use of nuclear weapons is justified if the state's existence is in jeopardy. But here's the unsettling part. Putin doesn't distinguish between the state and himself. In his mind, the survival of Russia is tied to his own survival. If the war in Ukraine spirals into a broader conflict that threatens his hold on power, Putin could very well see nuclear weapons as a tool to protect his regime. The danger is not that Russia will use nukes to win in Ukraine. The danger is that Putin might use them to save himself. It's a terrifying thought, but one we need to keep in mind as this conflict continues to evolve. So, where does this leave us? Are we on the brink of nuclear war? Probably not. But the threat, however unlikely, remains real. Russia's nuclear talk is a form of blackmail, a desperate attempt to scare the West into backing down. But as long as we remain united in our support for Ukraine, as long as we stand firm against this aggression, the likelihood of nuclear war stays low. But make no mistake, if Putin feels cornered, if his grip on power starts to slip, all bets are off. The world is walking a tightrope. One misstep, and we could plunge into chaos. If you found this analysis helpful, please give the video a like and consider subscribing to stay informed about the latest developments in this complex and dangerous situation. Your support helps us continue to bring you in-depth analysis on the most pressing global issues. Let's stay informed, stay vigilant, and keep the conversation going. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.